The open road is vast, lonely, and quiet. But for some truckers, the silence isn't empty. It's filled with whispers, shadows, and things that can't be explained. Tonight, we'll take you through 3 true horror stories experienced by truckers on the road. Stories that will leave you questioning what's out there in the darkness. From a phantom hitchhiker to a haunted rest stop, and a cursed motel that traps its guests. These tales will make you think twice about driving alone at night. Which story will haunt you the most? Stay until the end to decide, and to hear one final twist that may just keep you up tonight. If you're ready for a journey into the unknown, hit the like button and subscribe for more chilling tales. Now, let's begin. Dan had driven countless miles through the night, his only companions the hum of his engine and the endless stretch of road ahead. But this night was different. The fog hung heavy, swallowing the beams of his headlights, and the air felt thick, almost suffocating. As he rounded a bend, a shadow appeared on the roadside. A young woman stood there, her thumb outstretched. She looked out of place, vulnerable. Against every instinct, Dan slowed to a stop. "Need a lift?" he asked, rolling down his window. The woman nodded silently and climbed into the cab, her small bag clutched tightly in her hands. "Where are you headed?" Dan asked, trying to ease the tension. "Anywhere but here," she whispered, her voice trembling. Dan noticed her glancing nervously out the window, as if she were being followed. He tried to press her for details, but her answers were short, cryptic. The only thing she revealed was that she was trying to escape someone or something. Then it happened. A shadowy figure appeared in the middle of the road. Dan swerved violently, barely avoiding a crash. The truck skidded to a halt, and Dan turned to his passenger for answers. "Don't stop," she said, her voice urgent. "They won't let us leave." Dan kept driving until he spotted a small diner in the distance. Relieved, he pulled into the lot, ready to gather his thoughts. But when he turned to tell the woman they'd arrived, the seat beside him was empty. She was gone. Confused and shaken, Dan stumbled into the diner and told the man behind the counter about his strange passenger. The man's face grew pale. "You're not the first to see her," he said. "Her name was Lisa. She died on that road years ago, trying to escape her abusive boyfriend. They never found her body." Every time Dan drove that stretch of road, he found himself glancing at the passenger seat, half expecting her to return. But Dan's story isn't the only one. Sometimes, the things we encounter on the road aren't just ghosts, they're part of something much darker. Our next story takes us to a haunted rest stop. Jake was a seasoned trucker with over 2 decades of experience navigating lonely highways and desolate backroads. He thought he'd seen it all, but that night would change everything. It was a little past midnight when the fatigue hit him hard. The Midwest's empty roads stretched endlessly ahead, and the nearest town was hours away. Spotting a dimly lit rest stop sign, he decided to pull over for a quick nap. The rest stop was in worse condition than he expected. The lot was nearly empty, with only a few rusted cars scattered around. The building itself looked neglected, its windows cracked, and the flickering overhead lights cast eerie shadows on the ground. Jake parked his truck and leaned back, trying to shake off the uneasy feelings settling in his chest. The silence was absolute, broken only by the occasional whistle of the wind. But that silence didn't last for long. Just as Jake began to drift off, a faint tapping sound jolted him awake. He froze, his pulse quickening. The tapping was coming from his window. He turned slowly, expecting to see some late-night traveler asking for help. But what he saw sent a chill down his spine. A little girl stood outside his truck, no older than 6, clutching a worn-out teddy bear. Her hair was tangled, her dress torn, and her tear-streaked face glowed faintly in the dim light. Jake rolled down the window cautiously. "Are you lost, sweetheart?" he asked, his voice unsteady. The girl nodded, her lips trembling as she pointed toward the restroom building. "My mommy's in there," she said softly, her words barely audible. Jake hesitated. The restroom looked abandoned, its doors hanging off their hinges and graffiti covering the walls. Every instinct told him to stay in the truck, but he couldn't leave the girl alone. He climbed out, the cold night air biting against his skin. "Let's go find her," he said, taking her small, icy hand. The inside of the restroom was worse than the outside. The air was damp and carried a smell of mildew and decay. The lights flickered, casting long shadows that seemed to move on their own. Jake's boots echoed loudly against the tiled floor as the little girl led him to the farthest stall. "She's in there," the girl whispered, her grip on his hand tightening. Jake swallowed hard, his throat dry. Slowly, he pushed the stall door open. It creaked loudly, revealing nothing. The stall was completely empty. He turned to the girl, but she was gone. Panic set in as he called out for her, his voice bouncing off the empty walls. There was no response. The restroom was silent, and Jake felt an overwhelming sense of dread wash over him. Shaking, he hurried back to his truck, desperate to leave. But as he climbed into the cab, he froze again. Lying on the passenger seat was an old photograph. It showed the little girl smiling brightly, clutching her teddy bear. On the back, written in faded handwriting, were the words, "Missing since 1978. Jake didn't stay to question what he'd seen. He started his engine and sped away, his hands trembling on the wheel. The rest stop disappeared in his rearview mirror, but the image of the little girl lingered in his mind. Later, Jake learned the dark history of that place. Decades ago, a little girl had gone missing at the rest stop. Despite extensive searches, her body was never found. Truckers whispered that her spirit still wandered the area, searching for her mother, tapping on windows and leading unsuspecting travelers into the abandoned building. Jake avoided that stretch of road from then on, but every so often on quiet nights, he swore he could hear the faint tapping on his truck's window. A haunting reminder of the girl forever trapped in her search for her mother. Mike had been trucking for years, and he prided himself on his ability to handle any situation. But when his truck broke down late one rainy night on a desolate road, even he felt the weight of unease creeping in. The storm had rolled in suddenly, the rain pounding against his windshield and lightning illuminating the barren landscape around him. With no cell service and no sign of help, he was forced to continue on foot. That's when he saw it, a flickering neon sign glowing faintly through the rain. Vacancy. The motel looked like it hadn't seen guests in decades. The building was run down, its paint peeling, and its windows dark and foreboding. But with no other options, Mike decided to take his chances. Sound of thunder rolls as the screen fades to the motel's entrance. What he didn't realize was that this motel had already claimed its share of travelers, and he was walking straight into its trap. Inside, the lobby was dimly lit, the air heavy with the smell of mildew. An old woman sat behind the counter, her face emotionless as she slid a room key across to Mike. She didn't ask for his name, and she didn't say a word. Mike hesitated, but exhaustion won out. He took the key and made his way down the creaking hallway to his room. The door groaned as it opened, revealing a space that felt frozen in time. The wallpaper was faded and peeling, the furniture covered in dust, and a single light bulb hung from the ceiling, flickering intermittently. Mike locked the door behind him, threw his bag on the bed, and lay down, too tired to care about the unsettling atmosphere. But as the hours passed, sleep didn't come easily. The rain outside had stopped, leaving an oppressive silence in its wake. And then he heard it. At first it was soft, just a faint murmur that could have been the wind. But as the minutes ticked by, the whispers grew louder, more distinct. They were calling his name, Mike, Mike. Mike sat up, his heart pounding. He told himself it was just his imagination, but the whispers didn't stop. They seemed to be coming from outside his room. Gathering his courage, he opened the door. What greeted him was not the hallway he had walked down earlier. Instead, he found himself staring into a long, dark corridor that seemed to stretch endlessly into the shadows. The walls were lined with flickering sconces, and the air was freezing, each breath visible in the dim light. Compelled by an unseen force, Mike stepped into the hallway. The whispers grew louder, echoing off the walls, and he could feel the weight of unseen eyes watching him. As he walked further, the walls seemed to close in, narrowing with every step. At the end of the hallway, a figure emerged from the darkness. It was the old woman from the lobby, but her face was twisted, her hollow eyes fixed on him. She raised a gnarled finger and pointed at him. "You shouldn't have stayed here," she said, her voice low and hollow. "They won't let you leave." Mike turned to run, but the hallway was gone. He was surrounded by darkness, the whispers now deafening. When Mike woke, he was in his truck, parked on the side of the road. The rain had stopped, and the sky was beginning to lighten with the first rays of dawn. He looked around, disoriented and shaken. There was no sign of the motel. No neon sign, no building, nothing. He drove to the nearest diner and told his story to the locals. The room fell silent as an older man finally spoke. "That motel burned down decades ago," he said. "They say it lures in travelers with its sign, traps them, and some never leave." Mike never forgot the whispers, the endless hallway, or the warning from the old woman. And every time he passed through that area, he felt a chill, as if the motel was still watching, waiting for its next guest. Some places are meant to be avoided, and for those who ignore the signs, the consequences can last a lifetime or longer. But Mike's story is just one of many from the dark roads of the world. Stay with us as we explore more haunted highways, mysterious encounters, and chilling tales of the unknown. 3 stories, 3 truckers, and 3 chilling encounters that remind us the road holds more than just asphalt and headlights. Which story haunted you the most? Have you experienced anything unexplainable on the road? Share your story in the comments below. If these tales sent chills down your spine, hit the like button and subscribe for more true horror stories. And don't forget to turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Next time, we'll take you beyond the highways to explore the most haunted places in the world. Until then, drive safe and keep your eyes on the road.